It is the first day of the new year, and what better to talk about this on the first day of the new year than baseball?
For those of us that talk about next year, right, as Met fans, we definitely
It's here.
And this is next year now, so.
And we got to talk about the upcoming season, and it's going to be a very interesting one. And so, obviously the off season isn't complete yet, but we wanted to just take a moment right now to kind of look back at what's happened so far. Then look at some of the stuff we're excited about for next season.
Yeah.
And where we think some of the final pieces are likely to fall, given there's still a bunch of big name free agents out there still left to sign, even though it kind of doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, well, because we were waiting so long for Yamamoto to sign after Ohtani did, and I think you said off air that kind of like made the market a little quiet,
Right.
But it's heated up here as we got to the end of with Chris Sale signing, I think
getting traded,
but moving over at this point, I should say, for Grissom, which I thought was a really interesting deal on both teams'
it's a very
parts.
all-in move by the Braves. I think, kind of saying, okay, we got to do something to keep up with the Dodgers, otherwise we're just going to get lapped.
Yeah, and I only just because we just mentioned that particular deal, and that's the most recent one. I was surprised because to me it makes me think that the Braves were sort of hyping up Grissom. Now he did have one of those long Brave cheap deals where they signed him to 6 years or something like that. So I feel like they used him.
Well, I think it's only a good use of him if you get something out of Chris Sale,
right,
or he doesn't develop into anything. But if he does show flashes, you did the Red Sox, and absolutely, if he develops into the player you thought he was when you gave him that contract, then you just handed the Red Sox a great player on an incredibly team-friendly deal for a rental of Chris Sale that might not make a difference ultimately.
So you remember Chris Sale went over to the Red Sox, and then they won the World Series in 2018 with him getting the last out, I think.
I think so, yeah.
And then they signed him, and who was the genius that signed him to the 5-year, $140 million deal? Note, he's no longer the general manager there. He's the general manager in Philadelphia.
Ah.
Right, Dave Dombrowski, who we like to sort of applaud and say how great he is. So I think what makes him a great GM, and I do think Dombrowski is that he takes chances. Sometimes it doesn't work.
Right, and Sale, I think, is a deal you could say has not worked
There's
out.
no Red Sox fans going to go, yeah, that. There's no question. There's no middle ground there.
I mean, they got a World Series.
Disaster. Well,
so
they said that before.
Before, right, but they still got the World Series from him, so it makes it a lot easier to tolerate.
And Grissom's going to be their second baseman, for the Red Sox this year. So
right.
If you're going to make that kind of a deal, although 1 year left at Chris Sale, I just don't think the Red Sox gave up very much.
No, they did not give up very much.
And I don't think the Braves think they gave up that much either because they gave them up so easy.
I think they're hoping they did.
Yeah, I think you're right. I noticed something also, we talked about all the stats from last year and the things that changed. We done the pitch clock, and there was a change in the pitch clock.
Right, I think it's going to be 2 seconds shorter next year.
It's going to be 18 seconds. They're limiting the visits to the mound to 4 from 5. I don't really understand why.
I don't care. It doesn't make a difference.
And so, they're tinkering still, and we talked about this a little bit. But the thing that really got me was I think I saw the stolen bases last year were up 41%. So that's that. I didn't realize it was that much. I mean, I know that was, and they're making it 80% of the time, which the argument is they should be trying more.
Right, and I think you will see teams run more and more, especially this season. Now that you've seen a year where, okay, you stole a lot more bases. The better teams, the teams that made a lot of the more aggressive base running teams performed better. You are leaving runs on the base paths if you're not playing with, I think that was one of the Mets' biggest issues last year is they were an incredibly slow-footed team that couldn't really steal bases.
Look, how about the Mets? Have they ever been a fast team?
No, but
they have a fast player every once in a while.
Right, but that's a problem right now. You need to be team speed
athletic
is
and
more
young.
important than ever in baseball, maybe.
I think that's true, and the other aspect of the running game that really changed is I think relief pitchers had difficulty holding runners on and
not being able to throw over more than twice in at bat makes being able to draw the initial pickoff throw. You can't just throw over. I saw pitchers get caught a lot last year where they would do the routine throw over early in the at bat to just be like, I'm watching you. Except that's a double-edged sword.
Can't do that now.
Because if you do that one lazy kind of pickoff move that has no ability to get the guy,
the calling card
just to be like, I'm watching you. Well, now you only have one left. So if you don't get him when you go, he can get an insane lead basically because you can't throw over there, which guarantees a stolen base in some aspect. aspects.
And so the relievers like Ottavino, who was on the Mets, and like he's
And
terrible
it was a
at
big
that.
issue because it converts a lot more runs. Because now if you bring in a guy like Ottavino and he's got a guy on first base, he's got a guy on second base.
Yes, he's only on first base for one pitch.
Right, and that's a problem because now he's in scoring position, which
Agreed.
greatly reduces your margin for error. If you can give up if you have to give up 2 hits to allow a run instead of 1, that's a lot different when you're a reliever.
And the relievers themselves, because of the pressure, late game situations with the running game and the pitch clock, they wore down a lot of the relievers in a way that I guess I thought the starting pitchers. Remember, I was saying how the pitch clock was going to impact the starting. I don't really know
think it
that I can
affected
point.
them.
I don't have any evidence. I still feel like it has an impact, but it's not anything
I
I
think
can
for
quantify.
starters, if anything, they probably enjoyed it because it means they don't have to wait forever for some batters to do their whole pre-batting stance routine.
And the thing I hadn't thought about was if you're pitching faster in the pitch clock, you're after 4 or 5 innings, you've only been pitching like an hour and 15 minutes instead of an hour and
You just
40
haven't been
minutes or
out there
something
as
like that.
long.
You haven't been out there as long, and there's something to that as well, particularly if it's 95 degrees or something like that.
In the game moving and keeping crisp,
Yeah.
you don't wear down quite as quickly. The fast-moving games are easier to keep pitching in.
But there was some evidence that the relief pitchers struggle a little bit more with the clock for different reasons.
Right. You also think, like, especially with closers, they probably more than any other set of pitchers take forever between pitches because it's high leverage situations. So they're way more likely to take time between pitches, which means they're going to be affected by a pitch clock more than others. Though you saw some guys like Kimbrel just not give a shit.
Yeah, and he still doesn't.
Right. And he had like 19 pitch clock violations last season. He just didn't care.
I'm not even going to try to get faster.
Right.
So I picked up some data that the average starter from 95 to 2015 went anywhere between 5 2/3 to 6 innings. Okay, so that's about the norm for the longest. It was about 6 innings before that. Now we're down to 5.1 innings, which doesn't seem like that much.
But it's a noticeable
lot.
shift.
It's a lot.
And I wonder it's also because you also have less overall high quality starting pitchers in the major leagues right now. So there's a lot of teams where their 4th and 5th starters are just outright kind of bad. So it seems like there's more blow up starts on the regular from all across the major leagues, where it's not so much that guys aren't lasting as long, but rather the bottom tier pitchers in the major leagues kind of can't navigate their way through 6 innings anymore. Especially when they don't have their good stuff.
Only 5 pitchers got 200 innings this year.
Really?
Which really, Logan Webb had the most innings in the major leagues with 216. I mean, didn't we have like 380 innings, guys?
Right, we had
throwing stuff
300
like
inning
that.
pitchers.
Now, granted, it's so different now, and I've said this a million times on this podcast. Just the whole ability for the adjustment being made by the hitter within the game because of what they're able to see and do.
Right, the pitcher needs to go max effort on every pitch now, and he does not have batters where he can functionally take them off.
I agree with you.
And people think, oh, it used to be the pitcher because it used to just not be the pitcher. Like we've said, you used to have shortstops on your team that hit 200 and hit 1 home run in a season. So you just did not pitch to them the same way you pitched to the 3, 4, and 5 guys. The problem is now that guy is now a 260 hitter who has home run power, and it's just different.
And I'm still reading about major league catchers who are saying, yeah, I really like my pitchers to be able to find ways to, to work longer through the game by, not throwing max effort on every. These are catchers saying, having their pitch not throw max effort on every pitch. I'm like, but you see what's going on there. If they don't throw max effort, they're
not getting him out.
They're getting hammered. So I don't understand, that aspect of it. So I thought that what we would do is talk about the deals.
Right.
And go back to the beginning of the deals, and if you remember the first deal, because we were aware of it because it came out of one of our former players, Mark Canna. He was really the guy that led off the season.
No, granted, I don't think anybody would say that's a big move.
They keep talking about it like it is. I mean, okay, he's a nice ball player.
Right.
Yeah. And for the Tigers,
for the Tigers, a young Tiger team having a professional veteran like Mark Canna probably helps. You're not going to need him to play a ton, but he can fill in, give you professional at-bats, and be a leader in the locker room. I imagine it's a clubhouse kind of move, too, for them.
I think he will, at times in the season, be the 3rd outfielder because somebody will get hurt.
Right.
And so he'll be in there every day. But, yeah, he was brought in to be the 4th outfielder. And look, we love this guy.
And he's a great guy. And I think he's there to help a young team.
Big-time foodie, by the way.
Right.
He writes a whole food blogger. And he's going to be 35 in February. So I think if you're the Tigers and you think you've got a chance to win the division, which
having guys
that's
like
the kind
Mark
of player
right,
you would
that
want on
having
your
a guy
team.
like Mark Canna in the clubhouse helps you.
And then they didn't give up much for him. So the thing that I did find was surprising was, and we talked about him on our podcast, is this Mike Soroka, who was involved in this trade where Aaron Bummer went to the Braves. Do you know much about Aaron Bummer?
Not really.
Yeah, he's just a lefty. That's what I know about him. Soroka, Jared. So Soroka, boy, that guy was Rookie of the Year in 2019 and just hasn't been able to stay healthy. For him to be buried in this deal,
well, I think it's what's interesting
wow.
is that the Braves signed all these guys, these young guys, to these long-term flexible deals, and it seems like this offseason they moved off of some of them. They were like, okay, we have some of these young players, and some of them haven't looked at. Let's at least move them while there's still some value to them. Well, and we got to strike while our team is still in our window.
Yeah, and they got some players, for Aaron Bummer, but the players are guys that we're National League East guys, and I don't really know Nicky Lopez, Brandon Shimaki, Riley Govins. These are just names.
Yeah.
The Phillies re-signed Aaron Nola,
Which is something I think everybody expected all along.
Is that a good signing?
It's a necessary signing.
Right. Now, the Mets could have tried to sign him.
But, I mean, they spent a lot of money on Aaron Nola, and I think the
They
Mets
did that on Zach Wheeler, too. How'd that work out?
pretty well.
Yeah.
But I'm going to say the Mets didn't need Aaron Nola as much as the Phillies need Aaron Nola.
He's just a Philly. I'm still old school that way, going, he's played there the whole time.
Right. But
for
me, it's just that the Phillies are still thinking, okay, we lost in the NLCS and we probably shouldn't. Aaron Nola was a big part of that. We need him so that we can put ourselves back in contention to be back there next year. The Mets would say, we sign Aaron Nola and maybe we make the playoffs. It's not the same.
Agree. 100% agree. He wasn't the difference-making pitcher that I guess
everybody
hoped Yamamoto was going to be.
Right.
Like all of a sudden, well, maybe we are a playoff team.
No, it was more Yamamoto was 25, and you were going to have control of him for years.
So the Braves also brought in Ronaldo Lopez
for their bullpen, right?
For their bullpen, and he's a good player. So the Braves, we talked about that. You were kind of teasing me, going, I said the Braves didn't have much need for starting pitching, and they're proving that I was completely wrong.
Yeah,
I should never be a GM.
That was a conversation we were having the other night. You're like, I don't think the Braves need much starting pitching, and I was like, looking at you sideways, like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, obviously the Braves don't agree with me. They think they need lots of starting pitching. So
it was just that with Morton coming off of injury, with Strider having an interesting season where
he had a good season.
He had a very good season.
Excellent season.
But his ERA was up, his WHIP was up, and he was good, but he wasn't dominant in the same way, and he wasn't dominant in the postseason the way you would need out of your number one pitcher. And so you had guys like Soroka, who had never been able to come back from injury. And I think they're really looking, I think the big piece for the Braves this year is, what does Max Fried do?
Exactly. I was going to say the same thing. So every time that Max Fried hears Strider being the number one, it's got to piss him off a little bit.
Right, but he's got to make it onto the field for more than a month or two.
He just happened to get injured at the worst possible time last year, and he was injured twice last year, if I'm not mistaken.
And then he was injured the year before, too.
Yeah, I guess you're right. I don't think of him as an injured pitcher, but maybe I should. Another team that decided to go and get pitching, I'll let you determine what kind of pitching you think that is. So the Cardinals, who we know they needed a lot of things.
They were basically needed to sign pitchers.
They didn't have like guys with arms,
right?
So and obviously Montgomery is still uncertain as to what's going to happen with him. Mm-hmm. They got rid of the other pitcher. I'm trying to think who's the other pitcher who's not going to end up there. He went to the Baltimore Orioles. The guy who never made it with them, John Flaherty.
Okay,
who's one of those talented guys.
Yeah, but just never figured it out.
Did. So they went and they signed Lance Lynn and Kyle Gibson 1 year. Okay, so good that it's 1 year.
But that's just stopgap deals because you need arms for your starting rotation.
I mean, every time I think of Lance Lynn,
he's given.
I'm looking behind me to see how far the ball went.
Quality seasons the last few years to the teams that he started for.
He was awful this year, wasn't he?
I think he might have been bad this year, but he was pretty good the year before.
He was a home run waiting to happen. And Kyle Gibson, he's been that kind of guy for a while. Like, he'll give you innings. He's sort of like
But they didn't have anybody, and you had to spend money on somebody.
And that's not the only deal they did. We'll get to some more of those with the Cardinals. So the Mariners traded Eugenio Suarez to the Diamondbacks. Now, I really like this player, and my favorite call of the whole year is the home run call, the game winner against the Pirates, where Eugenio hit a 3-run homer, and you have to listen to the Mariners announcer. He goes crazy and all that. But Suarez going to the D-backs That's a really good move.
That's a good move by the Diamondbacks.
Really
right.
like what the D-backs are doing, and yeah, I'm going to preview.
That's a move to keep trying to,
I think they're winning the off season right now to a degree because they've done some really good things. There's more to come.
I feel like that's such a hollow statement. I mean, it's like they're winning the offseason besides the Dodgers.
Well, yeah, and we know why the Dodgers won the offseason because they spent a shit ton of money.
Well, they got Glasnow, they got Yamamoto, they got Ohtani. Anybody, if you're saying
all it takes is money.
If it's anybody, but they still did it. So it's anybody that you're playing for second for the offseason.
Yes.
Let's all be honest.
Well, I guess if you're thinking about not having money being no object or being the Dodgers, right? So nobody had a chance for Yamamoto once Ohtani signed with the Dodgers because he wanted to play with Ohtani. Right. So all the other teams that are throwing in, like, they had no chance.
Right. But it doesn't matter. They still won the offseason.
They did. So Suarez, I think is going to help the D-backs, and that's a great signing for a great trade for them. The Tigers, another pitcher, Kenta Maeda. What are they doing? Like having a pitcher that you're like, oh wow, yeah, they got it.
But what pitchers were like again? The only guys that were out there,
they're not in the market for Jordan Montgomery.
Right, and those guys, so they're going to sign guys like Kenta Maeda.
It's like, okay, now we got another guy with an arm. That's good, because we need guys with arms to pitch.
Right. I think
if you have no arms, it's really hard to pitch.
For you want every pitcher to be a number 1 or a number 2 quality starter.
How about one of them, like one or two, because they didn't get any of those guys.
Right, but is this a year you go out if you're the Tigers and spend $100-something million on a starter?
The only reason I would say I'm closer to saying yes than anything else is because I think they have a chance.
Right, they have a chance, but is this the year you want to commit that money?
Look what the D-backs did this year. I'd say yes.
Right. But you can't use the fact that the D-backs had a successful year. That's not a good reason. That's not
why.
Because they're not arguing that the Tigers built the same ready for success.
They're not necessarily.
Do they already have double top line starters like Zach Allen and Merrill Kelly?
And do they have even a Corbin Carroll like player in the wings?
Right. So they're not in the same spot to be able to just say, yeah, let's go drop $150 million on Jordan Montgomery to be the ace of our staff so that we might win the AL Central. You don't need to do that.
Well, and they're probably not going to do that.
No.
But the Cardinals signed another pitcher, so that would be 4 now, right?
Well, again, they literally had to.
Sonny Gray, that's probably the best of
that's
of
to give
all
them
their
at least
signings.
a guy at the top of their
rotation. Would that be their number 2, or is he going to be their number 1?
Depends.
Yeah. I don't really know. Sonny Gray, and they're paying him $25 million a year. That's what it costs.
He was good. He's been good for the last couple seasons.
I agree. So that's a good signing for a good pitcher. A pitcher I wouldn't mind having my team, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
The Reds obviously signed some players. They took Nick Martinez from the Padres, and they needed bullpen help. So Nick Martinez has a history of being good. Emilio Pagan. The Reds still need more pitching because I think they also have a chance to go forward in the NL Central this year. What did you think, if anything, of the Jared Kelenic trade? Finally,
I think it was just the Mariners moving off a prospect that never worked out for them. I mean, he would come up, have a week or two where he was great, and then he would go back to kind of being not very good at all. And you know what? The Mets got Diaz, so it worked out.
I just wish he didn't go to the Braves. Because it's going to turn out bad for the Mets that he went to the Braves somehow.
I can't be worrying about a prospect who was on our team, years ago and is now on a completely different team after busting out with another one. If he works out now, isn't that more of an indictment on the Mariners than the Mets?
Yeah. Yes, I think Jerry DiPoto deserves that, kind of criticism as well. But they got Marco Gonzalez, the Braves, which nobody's even talking about, right? Because there's another arm for the Braves, so they're stockpiling arms, and not necessarily a great arm, Marco Gonzalez,
arms nonetheless,
a guy who can give you innings, and Evan White, who was supposed to be and hasn't been a prospect. So they got 2 of those guys in this deal, hoping that Braves magic rubs off on one or both of those guys, and they actually are really, really good. And then there was the deal where for a while the Mets were talking about signing this guy. He pitched in Korea last year.
Right, Fedde.
Eric Fedde.
Who had unbelievable stats. And so part of the reason why I think he became such a hot topic is that all of his advanced peripherals are projecting out the way a new elite pitcher projects out. He added a good slider. All of his spin rate is up. All of the right advanced stats are up. So it's the kind of thing of saying, okay, if this works out, if this shows it, we have the model to scout guys that have figured it out.
Right, and I think in his case, if you don't see a guy play, and you remember the last time he played against your team as he was on the Nationals, the Mets hammered this guy.
Right,
And so that's the guy I remember going, bring him in. And all of a sudden he goes to Korea, and he supposedly gets fixed, and he's going to come back and be a guy, that doesn't look like Eric Fetty, that looks like Cy Young,
A good pitcher, right. And I guess because a guy was bad in the past doesn't mean he's going to be bad now.
I don't know, when you can beat a player, and I wonder about that with teams, right? So it shouldn't matter, right? Like, I never can beat the Mets. Like, no, that was then, this is now. It shouldn't matter.
It would only matter if it was year after year after year. If you face the Mets for 6 straight years and every year they hammer you, that's one thing. But if you played the Mets in 2017 and they hit you, and then 6 years later you come back to the States and play them again, the fact that they hit you in 2017 doesn't mean
it's not that long
much.
at this, but yeah, I think.
It's not the same players.
Right. And he's not the same player himself,
Right.
apparently, in Fetty's case. So the Yankees picked up Alex Verdugo, and they gave them some good prospects, and Verdugo never became what they hoped he would be in Boston.
But that's obviously not the outfield move anybody for the Yankees are talking
Well,
about.
and all that does is sort of buys them time when Jason Dominguez, who I think they want to have eventually play center field,
Comes back.
It comes back because Aaron Judge and Soto and Dominguez is a pretty nice outfield. If Verdugo is your 4th or 5th
That's
outfielder,
a really strong outfield.
That's a good outfield. I think I'd be pretty happy about that if I were the Yankees. So, yeah, and how about Soto and Grisham going to the Yankees?
So Soto to the Yankees. I think it's interesting because the Yankees, if they don't have a good year this year, do they re-sign Soto then?
100% yes.
You think
100%
you think
yes.
no matter what they're
No
gonna,
matter what,
they're
they're
going
gonna
to back
sign
up a Brinks truck to his house.
I think they have to.
They have to.
Yeah, I think
you
they
went all in to trade for this guy. You have to re-sign
I
him. Otherwise
wouldn't
it's a
be
nightmare.
surprised if he wasn't signed before the end of the season.
Just because you couldn't have that narrative going into the offseason next year.
And you're still going to pair 2 unbelievable outfielders in Soto
Right.
and Judge.
And Soto Judge
That lasts a long time.
Yeah, Soto Judge is your 3-4 is a hell of a 3-4.
For a long time.
Right.
So I really, I think, and the Yankees can afford it, that it sort of signifies a return to their, we're still the Yankees.
We can still
spend money,
Yeah.
Don't forget about us. Uncle Steve isn't the only game in town. The Reds signed Candelario. And I looked at this guy's stats, right? He's going to play third base, Heimer Candelario.
Yeah.
I'm just not sure what everybody loves about this guy because he really. So this year he returned to a 119 ops plus, but aside from that, I think his career is like 102. He's an average ball player.
Yeah,
and
but,
always has been.
but he had a really good year last year, and how many 120 OPS plus third guys are out there for you to just go and get?
And you know what it's worth today? $15 million a year, apparently.
Right, and I think that's one of those issues where we. If you're an older fan, the money can throw you off. I see it all the time happen in basketball where guys are like, oh my God, so-and-so's getting a $40 million deal. And that's what
the market is.
That's just where the market is. So now guys that you didn't think were good players get $10 million. That's just where the market is. So you can't use that as like oh wow, he's a $15 million pitcher or whatever, because this is not the same.
So it's a free agent signing, Candelario. We're Met fans, and we didn't know this at the time, I guess, because Mauricio got hurt after December 7th.
Yes.
But, had that happened differently, I think the Mets for $15 million for
Might have
Candelario,
considered it.
why wouldn't they have been a team that would have been vying for that?
And then I have to think that this is kind of another part of the reason why you thought the Diamondbacks won the offseason was because they went out and signed Eduardo Rodriguez.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that gives them another. Now they have 3 guys at the top of their rotation.
Really like that pitcher.
It gives them 2 you like and 1 you don't like in Merrill Kelly. But Merrill Kelly had a hell of a postseason. So you're thinking, okay, we've got a 3-headed, 3 guys at the top of our rotation that can deliver. As long as our lineup can produce, we'll be back in the playoffs. Hard to think they wouldn't be.
And the other thing they did is they signed Gurriel, re-signed Lure, which I think was a good signing. I think he's a good re-signing. So, that team, it's funny because, we can sit here right now and none of us would have picked the Diamondbacks at this time of year to be the team. And it's hard to look at. We talk about the Tigers. We talk about other teams that are going to look like that. But it's sometimes very hard to predict that. The Cardinals finally traded Tyler O'Neill, which they had to because apparently the organization hated him.
Right. They did not seem to like him.
And I still can't believe Ali Marmol kept his job, but
somehow he navigated that.
Somehow he did. So and they traded him to the Red Sox, and I don't know much about Nick Robertson and Victor Santos, the pitchers that the Cardinals got, but I know that they got rid of a guy who wasn't working in their clubhouse. I liked the player when he was playing well, but he hasn't in a couple of years.
That's one of
now.
those moves that's not really a needle mover. It's just shuffling players around.
Yeah, sometimes it's addition by subtraction,
Right.
in a way. In that case, this is, I think, a minor deal with David Fletcher going to the Braves and Max Stassi. And when that happened on December the 9th, he went for Evan White and Tyler Thomas. That was
But then
between the White
Braves
Sox.
sent off.
So wait a second. They've got Murphy. They've got
Well, they shipped
Darno.
Stassi off.
Stassi never donned a uniform for them, and he simply was shipped off like the
White
same
Sox.
day. So he will not. I was hoping he'd be like an immaculate grid guy,
No,
but he will never wear the uniform.
So they never actually played for
So
them.
he unfortunately will not suffice, though. Yes, Fletcher is another guy that I think, okay, he's going to be a backup infielder, and he had one good year, I think, at the pandemic year. But aside from that, I don't know much, why anybody would be excited about that particular player. We don't have to talk about Shohei Ohtani.
No, yeah, he went to the Dodgers.
We heard about that. The Royals signed a couple of pitchers, including former Met Seth Lugo.
And I think that's just a move to have them be a more competitive overall baseball team this year. You have some young players that are starting to come along. You need to start putting a more competitive environment around them. So you go out and you spend some money this offseason on guys just so that you can put a better overall product on the field. And it's the kind of division where, you know what, hey, if everything works out, that's a division you could win.
But not the Royals.
I think in a year where
So I'll give you their starting rotation right now. Cole Reagans, Jordan Lyles, Brady Singer, maybe Zach Greinke, Seth Lugo, and they signed another pitcher too.
I don't think they're getting back Greinke.
I don't think Greinke will have that distinction of having like that horrible first year of his career with Kansas City when he went like 5-17, I don't know what it was.
Right.
And he had another terrible season at the end. If you took those 2 years of his career out, he's got a much better career record taking those years out of it when he played for bad Royal teams both times. So I'll try to remember the other pitcher besides Lugo that they signed. The Giants signed Jung-Hoo Lee,
who's the biggest name kind of coming out of the KBO in a while. And I think in an offseason where Yamamoto and Ohtani both weren't moving, you would be hearing a lot more about this move. But you worry about this guy coming. It's going to be very interesting to see if he can come over and produce, because he was a big name player coming out of the KBO, but his advanced stats, especially in the power department, don't necessarily track out to be that great for the MLB. But sometimes advanced stats don't always tell the whole picture. So I'm going to be interested to see if he can produce, because if he can, you're definitely going to have a lot more teams looking over at the KBO now that they're looking at the NBP.
And I think when you think about players coming over from the Nippon League or the Korean League, the Red Sox guy, Masato Yoshida, had a nice start to the season, but kind of...
No, then he came on and played very well towards the end.
I was trying to assess, how would you assess his...
And Seiya Suzuki had a very good season, especially. He fit, both of them closed out really hot.
So you think they'd be happy if Lee had the same kind of season that...
Yeah. I think they would.
Yoshida did. Okay. You mentioned Tyler Glasnow, so going to the Dodgers.
Right. Manuel Margot is kind of the forgotten man in that deal, but I think because he doesn't do anything for the Dodgers.
He doesn't. And there's another guy, like every time they say, well, he's the heart and soul of our team. You look at Margot's stats and like, he's like an average ball player.
I think the more interesting thing is Pepio and DeLuca are
upside guys. The Dodgers
So
had hoped that Pepio was going to be a mainstay, and obviously they stopped thinking that because that's why they traded him.
Right.
And yeah, I think that Glasnow is the gem there. They paid him obviously,
but
once they brought him in.
It's a big risky move. He's been hurt. If he doesn't come back, that's a lot of money you just committed to a guy that hasn't pitched much recently.
But they basically, the guys they've brought in, the Dodgers, obviously aside from the two obvious guys,
if everything works out,
they've got talent. Walker Buehler is like almost a forgotten guy.
But that whole pitching staff is literally on the IR minus Yamamoto.
Tape and glue.
Right.
Yes. And Kershaw's not even part of the mix, and we're not even sure Kershaw's going to come back to the Dodgers necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned Gurriel going back to the Diamondbacks. And let's just cover the past couple. Miss Garver went to the Mariners. And I guess he he's going to DH and play catcher because they've got a really good catcher in Cal Raleigh there. So I assume he's going to DH more than that. And he's had some good season cover and the 877 ops over the last 4 seasons.
Right, and I think and for a Seattle lineup that was anemic at times, having him in there is definitely going to help.
Yeah, well,
because they so live and died by Julio Rodriguez. They need some other guys in that lineup that can help produce.
And they lost Suarez, and they lost, if you don't like him, but Kellenic is gone too.
Kellenic might be addition by subtraction.
I think you might be right. The Blue Jays, and this just happened the other day, they signed Kiermaier. Kevin Kiermaier, who's played there before.
And IKF.
And IKF. And there's another...
Isaiah Kiner Falefa for everybody who's not from the New York area.
And the Yankee fans are like, we're really going to miss IKF. He was...
Okay, that is a lie. That is a lie.
No, I swear.
Any Yankee fan... No.
They're saying
any Yankee fan that's telling
he
you
was a good Yankee.
No, they hated him. I know they would... The screeds
no,
they wrote
you're wrong.
him.
That's not what I read.
Oh, that is revisionist history from the Yankees.
That's not what I read at all. I said they read that they will miss him, and he'll be a good solid player for them. Like he's not.
That would be like Met fans telling you that they're going to miss Daniel Vogelbach.
Miss him? You can't miss him. You got to look that way. Giolito went to the Red Sox just the other day,
and I think that's a move that with the Chris Sale trade, you kind of had to make if you're the Red Sox, just because you needed to have a guy at the top of your rotation that's had some success in the major leagues.
Yeah, but $19 million for 2 years. I mean, it's only 2 years,
and it's an upside deal because when he's been good, he's been very good.
When was the last time he was good?
A year or 2 ago.
Yeah, that recently? You think?
Yeah,
okay,
pretty good year the year before.
At his peak from 19 to 21, he had a 3.47 ERA with a no hitter and Cy Young support each season. So I guess that's recent enough to count, even though a pandemic year is in there, so it's not full 3 years.
19, 20, 21, and he only had a bad 22 then.
Yeah. I just maybe a change of scenery. Although going to Red Sox to me doesn't necessarily help your pitching statistics. So those are basically the moves, right? That I think happened in the offseason.
So far, and we've got some left. It's going to be interesting to see where the dominoes fall. I think everything's going to be quiet until we get a little bit past the new year. But then once I think maybe one of the pitcher goes, like Montgomery or Snell, then we'll probably get the movement on the rest of the market. I think teams right now are kind of holding off on signing anybody because the starting pitching market went up so high in value that teams are probably a little concerned that they need to hold back some money to make sure that if they want a pitcher, they've got the money to get them, which might be why we haven't seen guys like Justin Turner or J.D. Martinez sign. 2
guys mentioned as possible Mets as well. And we're coming up on the salary arbitration date, which is January the 12th, and that's only significant because you think you want to make your other deals as much as you can before you start going to arbitration and putting in your deals and deciding how hard you want to keep a player or just throw a number out there and see what happens.
So anything in particular are you looking forward to this year?
Anything in particular I'm looking forward to? I'm looking forward to seeing if Ronald Acuna can do it again because he had such an outstanding season, both running and everything else, winning the MVP. I'd love to see if he could steal 70 a second time. That's something that's crossed my mind a few times. How about you?
I'm really looking forward to seeing this year how much the second year of the pitch clock affects that. Now that everybody's used to it, I'm kind of interested to see our team starting to understand how to play with it more, or is it kind of just last year where some pitchers adjust to it, other pitchers kind of ignore it, and it's that. And just as a Met fan thing, I'm excited to see if the young players come along. What kind of season do we get out of Alvarez and Beatty and Vientos and Drew Gilbert and all those guys?
What about, I saw this today, so it made me think of it. So how about a season for Shohei Ohtani? Like, what would be like something that, he's not going to pitch, so he can focus all the way on hitting now.
He's got to be like 280 to 300, 50 homers, like something.
1,000 OPS.
Yeah, he's going to be.
That would be like a 50 homers and 1,000 OPS.
And then you just
that
have
would be
an
nuts.
Unbelievable 1-2-3 punch of Betts, Freeman, Ohtani.
Right. And the Dodgers will lose in the National League Championship Series.
And it'll be hilarious.
And it'll happen again, and they're going to be just pounding.
Again, they didn't even make it there last year.
No, they didn't even go. I'm saying they're going to get a little further this year because at least now they have
the difference with Ohtani.
So, hey, we're about, 50 days out from spring training, and we're also March 20th. Like I keep saying, is the first game. So we're now only 2.5 months from opening day. Although it's weird because you play the games in Korea the 20th and the 21st, and then there's no games for a week.
It's like a tease.
Yeah, it is a tease, and that's happened before. And you got to be messed up if you're like you got to go play games that count, right?
They take like a week off,
and then you take a week off, and when you were in September, going, remember those games we played like in March?
You really hope that you don't end up missing the postseason by a game or two.
Because it's hard to say. They all count the same, but it probably won't feel that way.
No.
So, I'm excited, and we've been watching a lot of baseball movies, trying to catch up on some stuff, and we saw I saw the It Ain't Over movie, the Lindsay Berra family made a movie about Yogi Berra. Really good movie. Recommend it highly. And so we'll talk some more about baseball movies, because I think we kind of came to the conclusion together watching a few of this. Like, there hasn't been a good baseball movie
in a while.
In a while. I guess It Ain't Over is a documentary, but
that's not a movie.
Yeah, not the movie the way they were talking about.
Not like a story.
So I got an idea for one. So maybe we'll talk about that.